Hi, I'm Anoosh Chakelian, Britain editor at the New Statesman and host of this podcast. And joining me in the studio, I have Freddie Hayward, our political correspondent, and Rachel Cunliffe, our associate political editor. And they've been digging around in our mailbag and have brought a couple of questions from you to discuss today. So, Rachel, let's go with you first. What have you chosen?
So this is a question from Joe S., who asks, have Labour sort of gotten away with the 28 billion thing? They seem to have taken a bit of a hammering, but I expected it to be far worse. Can I say that I love referring to this as the 28 billion thing?
Yeah, it has become that.
Yeah,
we
rather
all
than
know
the
what it
28
is.
billion question, which has become a bit of a cliche now.
Yeah.
So for any of our listeners who have been away for a while, this was Labour promising to spend 28 billion a year on a green industrial transition if they won the election. And they initially announced this in 2021 at conference. Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, it was a big sort of pledge. And this has been watered down and equivocated over time. And in the end, they completely U-turned on it at the beginning of this month. And now the spending plans are down by almost 75% on this issue. And our senior editor, George Eaton's cover story in the New Statesman about this a few weeks ago explains exactly how that decision came about. But what we're trying to answer is whether or not they got away with such a big U-turn. What do you guys think, Freddie? Do you think they've managed to weather the storm?
I mean, it's never going to be the turning point in a general election campaign when someone just, changes how much money they're going to spend on a specific policy but retains the policy itself. So we have to remember that they're still trying to decarbonise the electricity system by 2030. They're keeping the Great British Energy, the National Wealth Fund, the Home Insulation Plan, even if the latter's been defunded to some extent. I think the big problem is that it fitted into a broader narrative that Keir Starmer lacks principles. He doesn't have the conviction to radically change the country at a juncture in politics when radicalism and a sense of grasping the problems that the country faces was needed. So I think that's the risk. Are we going to see that immediately play out? I'm not sure. I think the Tories will draw on it going forwards, and I also think they're still going to accuse the government of being profligate with the public finances because they've retained so many of the policies that were already there. I think as well, if we look at the actual chronology of what happened, you saw it immediately being overshadowed by Rochdale. And then this week it's been overshadowed by the debate in Parliament over Gaza. So I don't think there was necessarily the space for it to get the attention that it might have needed. And also, let's remember that we've been having this debate for a very long time now. It's been 2 or 3 months when there's been briefings about whether it's going to go, whether it's going to stay. So, any impact or negative effect on polling might have already happened.
Yeah, it was a bit of a slow motion U-turn, really.
It's a torturous death.
Yeah, they were U-turning on it for a while, blocking up the road.
Yeah, I think that what is interesting about the way that decision got made is the attacks from the Conservatives for months, years actually, since the policy was announced. Every time that they're challenged on anything, it's always been, but look, Labour, they want to get out the chequebook, 28 billion. Like, that's become kind of like a tagline, like a catchphrase that they were using, that Rishi Sunak was using at PMQs. Every time he got asked a difficult question, it was, we may be having issues with X, Y, Z, but look at Labour, they want to spend 28 billion. And there was a feeling that it had sort of become, that figure had become an albatross, essentially, around the necks of Labour, wanting to show that they were financially responsible. The thing is, though, that having had months of back and forth, will they, won't they drop it, when they announced that they were dropping it, it took seconds for the Tory comms machine to just switch gears and go from Labour are financially irresponsible to Keir Starmer flip-flops on anything, you can't trust him. And there was a really interesting column in the Telegraph in that week by a Telegraph comment editor who was really against the 28 billion as a policy, but was writing how that meant that you couldn't trust Keir Starmer with anything because he says one thing and then does another. And so I think Labour may have been naive if they thought that ditching the policy would protect them, sort of be a defensive move, because all that it did is it just switched the attack line to something else.
Well, yes. And also, whatever they're planning on carrying on spending on these issues is still borrowing, isn't it? 4 billion or something, somewhere around that. And to be honest, once you're in the billions, it's very difficult to sort of envisage that as
sooner or later we're talking about real money.
Seen £1 billion. Yeah, so I think the attack line can kind of stay, but it's reinforced with this idea that I think that the Conservatives have had some traction on, which is of, like you said, Freddie, of Keir Starmer as someone who changes his mind, flip-flopper, Captain Hindsight, someone who blows with the wind and no one knows what he truly believes. And that's something that does come up, even from people who are saying that they're going to vote for Labour this time round, that they don't really know what they stand for. They don't really know sort of what his politics are. And I think that's probably the bigger vulnerability with a U-turn like this. But it did come up. I think I said this on the podcast with you and Ben Walker about the by-election results last week. It came up in Kingswood, where there's quite a lot of manufacturing jobs. Rolls-Royce, Airbus, BAE Systems, people care about the future of these industries, and they were bringing it up on the doorstep. It wasn't just a sort of Westminster issue. So people have noticed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that just plays into the broad narrative about whether Labour will be able to grasp the issues. But I do think we should also, look ahead, and I do think it prefigures some of the problems that Labour will encounter in government. We always have to remember that the problems aren't just going to disappear because Keir Starmer walks through the number 10 threshold. The boats will keep coming, the economy won't just suddenly grow, the NHS will still be in a mess.
Ceilings in schools made out of dodgy concrete will keep falling on children's heads.
Exactly. So the fiscal bind that Rachel Reeves has imposed on the party will keep coming into tension, I think, with the broader prospect or the broader desire within the party to deal with public services or, and
the appetite in the country.
Move to net zero. Exactly. And that tension isn't going to disappear.
Thanks so much for watching. We'd love to know what you think. Please make sure you leave your comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this podcast, you can watch more of our videos on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.